Energy security, economic development, and environment protection have been for longer period the main mutually linked objectives and priorities of all national economies in the world. Provision of sufficient energy in economically, energetically, environmentally acceptable manner, respectively achievement of compromise between economy and ecology, has become the goal of every country, as well as the global goal at the world level. All modern and developed economies of the world are dependent on energy and fuel supply. Such dependence is resembled in the amounts as well as prices. Sudden disorders in the energy supply may have not just huge economics and business impact to each country, but also to overall national security, because energy security represents one of my national security factors. Energy deficit, price increase, as well as danger of terrorist attack on the energy infrastructure cause the energy security issues are of strategic importance for our region, European Union, as well as for many other countries in the world. It is becoming harder to ensure secured energy supply and find new energy sources in order to meet decreasing demand. Energy is a prediction for sustainability of modern society. Due to often problems with energy supply, the contemporary world fears of unavailability and insufficiency of energy. Montenegro, as well as the European Union, North America, and many other countries in the world, is dependent to a great extent on the import of energy. Montenegro imports total demand for liquid and gas fuels and around 1/3 party of electricity. This was contributed to long-standing stagnation in construction of own energy sources and increased household consumption. All our strategic documents, Energy Policy of Montenegro from 2005, Energy Development Strategy of Montenegro by 2025, adopted in 2007, as well as other planning documents, define energy security as of primary relevance. One of main goals and priorities of the energy development of Montenegro is security in energy supply, for the purpose of harmonizing the supply with the consumer demands. One of key strategic commitments of the energy policy, defined for the purpose of achieving the set goals, is constant reduction of Montenegro's dependence on energy import, in order for Montenegro, being currently the net importer of energy, to become, after 2020, the net electricity exporter. In order to achieve this strategic goal, it is necessary to implement a line of activities and projects on reduction of specific consumption of final energy, increase of energy production using of resources, and the reduction of energy losses in all segments, from generation to final consumption. Main objectives of establishing the energy community are the increase in security in energy supply to construction of new generation and transmission energy facilities, increased use of renewable energy, and development of market competitiveness, with improvement of environmental situation. Montenegro is committed to more intensive use of domestic energy potentials, primarily renewable, but also other available resources, coal, gas, oil, which should contribute to our country becoming a relevant energy partner at the regional level.
That the major risk to energy security is the risk of wrong investment decisions. Because for me, investments is the key word for development in any type, in any industry, especially important it's in energy, because energy projects are most capital intensive. They have the longest investment cycles, so the risks of wrong investment decisions is something that, from my point of view, is a top economic issue when we're speaking about energy security. Of course, it needs to be understood that energy security today is the sort of triangle issue. It has three components: security of supply, security of demand, and security of infrastructure. Any financial transactions, they are short-term. They are aimed at receiving of the short-term profit. This means that today, oil price, which is a dominant driver of economic growth worldwide, is a short-term financial price in its substance. And it's not anymore providing signal for project financiers, for those investors who would not like to earn their money in the financial transactions, but for those investors who are aimed to invest in the physical assets, in bringing into life the investment energy projects, in production, in consumption, in infrastructure. That's one of the negative results of the development, and now we're coming to transatlantic issues, of the so-called Anglo-Saxon model of developing of open, competitive, liquid markets. I think that today we have passed the equilibrium in development of this philosophy and come to some of the margins which has this negative effect, short-termism. So today, another undertaking of the global community is to try to find out what are the economically justifiable limits of price fluctuations if the price needs to reflect the marginal costs. Upper limit, what are the marginal costs of the alternative fuels? And the lower limit, what are the marginal costs of available traditional energies? Today we saw that competitive niche for gas, including Russian gas in Europe, has been narrowing in quantities, and there are incremental uncertainties, which mean incremental risks, for the long-term investment decisions destined for the European Union due to the development of the third energy package. And for instance, if somebody will ask me why, for instance, such huge investment projects as Stockman or Bovanenko in Russia has been postponing their final investment decision, I will say, look guys, all these projects are usually financed based on the project financing. They're financed based on the long-term contracts. And if there is no clear demand for gas, no financial institution will provide money to invest these projects because they will be not guaranteed that they will be the payback of these investments.
The higher risk in terms of security of energy is related to long-term investment. From this point of view, I think the Balkanic area is very lucky because, unfortunately, really in Balkanic area, we do not have new investment. So, if I'm not wrong, the last investment in generation, in energy generation was done 30 years ago. So that means, at least, we avoid the biggest risk to make a wrong investment. The modern society is facing to ensure a viability of energy, whatever or in spite of the nature of energy. We are talking about oil, we are talking about gas, we are talking about electricity. But of course, the main challenge is to ensure a viability of energy. In order, from one side, to satisfy the growing request of energy. Don't forget that in few decades, the so-called BRIC country, that means Brazil, Russia, India, and China, will demand more energy rather than the overall industrial rest of the part of the world. That means the growing request of energy is starting from, since now, one of the most, let me say, important challenges. Then, when you are talking, I agree about the fact that energy doesn't reply or is not completely inserted in a real, let me say, scheme of demand and supply in terms of price. But there is another element. So we are talking about an increase in volumes, but at a lower cost. Why? From one side, because the growing and emerging countries are not ready to pay energy as energy is paid in other countries. From another point of view, we have, especially in emerging countries, generation of the plants that are generating energy that are less efficient in respect to the plant for generating energy that we have in the so-called industrialized way. The third aspect that we have to face every day is the level of continuity and level of service of the supply of energy. Because, of course, we have to be, let me say, able to provide the right amount of energy in the right place, at the right moment. And unfortunately, as you know, energy cannot be stopped. That means only balancing the network, we can, and be interconnecting several networks, we can be able, let me say, to satisfy this demand that is completely unstable, or let me say not constant in terms of quantity, in terms of time, and in terms of localization. Last but not least, we are asked, but it's clear that from the people, and today, for instance, in Italy, we have a referendum regarding the nuclear power energy. People and the civil society is always more, let me say, related and asking for renewable energy, for energy that can be controlled by people, and not for energy that can create problem or can create problem, especially in the future. So the last point is the nature of energy is another, let me say, important fact. It's not only necessary to provide energy, but also to pay attention and to on the nature of the energy. The only solution is represented by the fact that energy can be the energy networking, but not only from a physical point of view, from a logical point of view, from an operative point of view, has to be integrated. You will be able to provide better energy, more energy at a lower prices only if we can interconnect. In Montenegro, we have developed, and here between Italy and Montenegro, a good relationship in terms, not only in terms of investment, as I mentioned before, A28 invested in a PCG in order to have one relevant part of the company, but Italy is investing and decided to invest in Montenegro also with the project related to the undersea cable. That from my point of view is a real opportunity for Montenegro not only to be connected with the West European distribution system or distribution network, but also in order to become the hub for the whole area of Balkans, because the interconnection is also very relevant, very important, because it represents the point from which is possible to exchange, let me say, energy, and to exchange energy with Europe. Talking about Moracha, maybe we do not remind a very important fact. When I personally arrived, the project of Moracha was based on 3 different dams, and it was a project that was done 25 years before by a PCG. So we started discussing with the government. Now the project is completely different. The project, we have 3 different projects that we can quote on, we can work on them, and of course the respect of the nature for us is one of the most important facts. Unfortunately, I cannot, let me say, reveal right now the project at which we are working on, because we are during the tender. But I can promise you that if a PCG wins the tender, we will be available to discuss and to present all the aspects of the project, and I think that this project is completely different from the previous one. This is as far as the respect of the Moracha River and the respect on the environmental condition is concerned.
I will use an example of Ukraine and Belarus. It's very short, which would be a good example illustrating how energy dependency could undermine position of one country. So basically, the major points which I would like to highlight is, of course, uncertainties and unpredictability, not only in the price structure, because you know that the volume of gas and other hydrocarbon is going down, but for some other events which we never could factor. One of them is the earthquake in Japan, as you said, and overreaction of Germany to close all the nuclear power plants, which might trigger the increase of demand of gas, actually, in Germany. Second, as you mentioned, Libya, which immediately triggered, it was translated in the supply of energy to Italy France and Spain. Nobody could predict that. Another point which I think is important, since we're talking about the alternative sources of energy, is the value of a biofuels in the United States. So this is important. And since we narrow our discussion mostly here about this region, so of course the major provider of hydrocarbon is Russia. And if not mistaken, about 95% come to Western Europe and Turkey.